Hi everyone, John Drummond here, and welcome to another exciting TNT show. And I guarantee you this show will be exciting. Now, I apologise to all of you who've been kept waiting. Obviously, we didn't start on time precisely at 7 o'clock. We are 10 and 11 after that. But I think you'll find it worthwhile if you've been waiting to join us, because tonight we'll be talking to Ged O'Brien. Now, those of you with longish memories may recall that way back when the TNT show was in nappies, in its infancy, Ged very kindly came along and talked to us about Scottish football. Well, a lot has happened since then. And one of the features we want to talk about tonight, and Ged will be joining us very, very shortly, because we're going to cut across all the preamble that we usually have at the beginning of the show and at the end. But I still encourage you to send us your questions, because I think you'll find what Ged has to say stimulating and innovative. And it will serve to underline, I suspect, for many of you, a lot of what you didn't know about football in Scotland. I know many of you watching and listening tonight will be saying to themselves, hey, it's the World Cup. I know everything about football. I can tell you not only about Scottish football, I can tell you about other countries' football as well. And I'm sure that's true. But, and this is a huge but, I think some of the things that Ged will be talking about tonight will be, for some people, quite earth-shattering, because there's no question that Scottish football has not gotten the attention it deserves. But don't take my word for that. We'll be joined very soon by Ged O'Brien, who will be telling you in significant detail about perhaps a lot of the factors and features of Scottish football you just didn't know. And this is the terribly, terribly exciting point for me, is the extraordinary reach of Scottish football. In other words, what you're watching tonight and over the course of the last few days and the rest of the World Cup, a lot of that is down to a bunch of people from Scotland. Anyway, there's no point in me talking from a well of enormous ignorance. Far better that we talk to the man himself, the guy who really knows about Scottish football. And tonight, it's my great pleasure to welcome Ged O'Brien to the TNT show. Hi, Ged. How are you?
John, I'm doing extremely well, and thank you for inviting me on, because there's an awful lot to talk about since we last met.
Yes. Now, remind us of at least the bare bones of what we discussed back then.
Well, a few years ago, when I came on to discuss this issue, I had started on the idea of writing a book. So I was still in the midst of trying to work out for myself, right, what sort of book will this be? So I had the title, The Scottish Game, How Scotland Invented Modern World Football. But I didn't really know how I was going to push that forward with the information I had that I'd collected over 30 years previously from when I started the Scottish Football Museum project. And of course, other people were working on side projects, and the idea that Scottish football was worth analysing was coming up at me from strange and interesting places. Like, I've been working with Archaeology Scotland, because as a policy decision, they have now taken an interest not just in old castles and mansions. They're now looking at places like the first Hampden, which, as far as I'm concerned, is more important than any castle, because it has a greater reach and a greater influence. And in a sense, what's happened to me over the last 2 years is I have been amazed by that Scottish influence, a small country with a reach through the social phenomenon of football vastly beyond anything that any other country can achieve.
So how did this vast influence happen?
Well, I regard football now as basically the sporting outcrop of the Scottish Enlightenment. Because the first thing I have to remind you is it's really strange. It's a paradox. When I'm doing talks, I always check to see who's not really interested in football, which is fine. Because the last thing football is about is 22 people kicking a bag of air up and down a field. What it is, it tells us about the culture of Scotland. And we're sat here at the start of the Qatar World Cup. And so we can go tonight from Glasgow in particular, Scotland in general, and actually what they're doing right now in Qatar is playing the Scottish game. And I feel it's my lifetime's work to draw the thread between the south side of Glasgow and a Middle East country.
So when you say they're playing the Scottish game, in what respect is that game that they're playing Scottish? What does the game they're playing just now owe to Scotland?
Okay. Some of this is going to sound funny because I'm going to give you ideas which any football fan knows. So you watch any of the games from any of the countries in the World Cup, and you will see players moving up and down the pitch in a regular fashion, but they've clearly trained. You will see them passing the ball from one player to another in an intelligent fashion. You will see them kicking the ball, trapping the ball, heading the ball. In concept, every single